for the banks is really not very closely related to the cash rate at all. So about 60% of the cost of funds for the bank is the domestic deposit base. And as savings has been softer, as we've been talking about, demand for that deposit base is rising. The other 40%, the banks need to borrow from global markets, and as we've just been talking about, global interest rates are rising. So when we talk about out of cycle, well, it's not the Reserve Bank that sets the cost of funds, it's the market that sets the cost of funds.
Nikki made the mention, as have others, about emerging markets. For the sake of discussions about these, what, Stephen, are emerging markets? How are they defined?
Well, I think the definition really is a broad one, or perhaps not, a single definition. But the economies that are still in if you like, an earlier phase of their development. China is seen as the big obvious one, but other countries in our Asian region, they don't have as high income per capita as the so-called developed world. So it's really about moving. The countries in the emerging markets are moving from a lower income per capita to a much higher income per capita, developing that modern economy base, if you like.
So we've seen, obviously, the GFC was started in Wall Street. Are the risks, perhaps, the next time somewhere from this?
Well, if you look at emerging markets, as I think Nikki mentioned, it's a function of a much stronger US dollar. So a lot of those emerging market countries have currencies pegged to the US dollar, so as the US dollar goes up, that makes it much more difficult for them to pay back their debt. There's also perhaps institutions that aren't as strong as we've got here in Australia, who their management of economies when things start to go wrong is not as good. And because we're in this global world where capital moves around the world at the speed of light, investors can put money in very quickly, but they can take it out pretty quickly as well. But some of the emerging markets that have been pockets of problems in the last 6 months or so, they're not, the problems are not related to each other. There's one problem perhaps in places like Turkey or Argentina or South Africa, and there are different problems in each place. But so far we haven't seen any really systemic issues across the emerging market world, which is a good thing.
Because John Hewson, obviously one of the GFC extended out into the period when Europe got essentially caught up in the conflagration, and it was Greece really that became the trigger point there, which is a tiny part of the European market. Would you be concerned, looking around, that it might be an essential minnow in the world?